Less than a month remains in the 2024 regular season, and the next Minnesota Lynx beat writer Terry Horstman is here to chat all about the team's week, including matchups against the Aces and a trade, as well as the team's push for the playoffs, what to expect the rest of the season, and more. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and happy Friday. You are locked on to women's basketball. I'm Natalie Heavren, and I'm a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for the Next. Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If this is your first time listening to Locked On Women's Basketball, welcome. We at The Next have over 100 reported pieces every single month. We have a beat reporter on every single WNBA team, one on more than 15 different NCAA beats, so get that YouTube subscription up. And you can also support us by subscribing to The Next for $9 a month or $72 a year at thenexthoops.com. Today, we'll be chatting all about the Minnesota Lynx, including how the team has looked since returning from the Olympic break, its 2 games against the Aces this week, its playoff push, and what to expect the rest of the season. Joining me today is Terry Horstman, who covers the Minnesota Lynx at The Next. Welcome, Terry. Got us jump right in. There were a couple of trades before the trade deadline on Tuesday, including one involving the Lynx. Can you break down the trade and how you expect it to impact the team?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and thank you for having me, Natalie. So on deadline day, there were sort of a flurry of deals around the league. I think maybe the most notable one did involve the Lynx and the Mystics, who had also just played each other in back-to-back games. So it's always fun when that happens. The Lynx acquired Myisha Hines-Allen from the Mystics in exchange for Sika Kone, Olivia Apupa, and a 2026 second-round pick. And I know we'll be talking about the game against the Aces on Wednesday night pretty soon, but she made herself useful and fit into the system pretty much right away. So I think we got a pretty good example on the court of how Myisha Hines-Allen fits in with what Cheryl Reeve wants to do by her having a pretty good game in her first Lynx game ever after flying, across the country to join the team in Vegas. Just got one shoot around in and then played a pretty crucial role in that win against Las Vegas. But definitely adds a lot of versatility and some toughness as well, rebounding acumen. And was a big factor in her first game. So it looks like a pretty good trade right away, and we'll see how it continues to work. But definitely bolsters the toughness, as I mentioned, and should be a meaningful player as the team goes through the playoff push.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that in a minute. But one thing, I was just scrolling through Twitter the other night, and Myisha Hines-Allen ended up having played with Napheesa Collier in France a couple of seasons ago. So, how do you think that familiarity, even if it's just with one player, helps her as she is acclimating to the team? And as you mentioned, one shoot around and then playing in a game already.
Sure. And I asked Cheryl Reeve about that during pregame on Wednesday night. And I don't know how big of a factor it was, but she did mention that when Myisha signed her latest deal to remain in Washington a few years ago, she was a restricted free agent, and the Lynx were courting her at that point in the free agency process. So they weren't able to land her then, but are a few years later get her in a trade. So there has been interest in acquiring Myisha Hines-Allen before, and I will probably butcher the pronunciation here, but Latte Montpellier won the French league that year with Myisha Hines-Allen and Napheesa Collier, playing a lot of minutes together. So and they look pretty good, playing, sharing the court, and Hines-Allen spelled fee for a couple stretches there. So it looked like they had played together before. So I think it's definitely helpful.
And for everyone who missed it, how did the Minnesota Lynx fare against the Las Vegas Aces last night?
It was about as good an offensive performance as you can ask for. And the funny thing about it is the one better offensive game they've had this year was when they played in Vegas earlier this season and, scored 100 points in regulation in that game back on June 11th. Fell just one bucket shy of hitting triple digits last night. And they just really, set the nets on fire. It was one of Courtney Williams' best offensive games in a Lynx uniform this year. Just, money from mid-range. Pretty much everyone got going at one point. All 5 starters had double figures, and then you got another 20 points off the bench. So they were just generating great looks and knocking them down. And there's a few different stretches in the game where the Aces really put a run together and got the lead down to about, be like 4, 5, or 6 at different points. And Lynx just counterpunched every single one of those runs and didn't let Vegas hang around for, very, very long after that. And I wouldn't call it a complete blowout, but it felt pretty comfortable from a Lynx perspective, start to finish. So I hesitate after, we're only 3 Lynx games into this, sort of second act of the season after the Olympic break. So like peaking at the right time sort of feels like a bit of a stretch, but they're playing great basketball and the ball is finding the bottom of the net for a lot of people. And they're playing with Fee for the first time since she injured her or aggravated her plantar fascia in a game against the Sun on July 4th. So she missed the last 5 games before the break. So, they're really trying to, sort of play to Fee and play through Fee and make sure she gets a lot of open looks, and she's finding her sweet spot and knocking them down. So it's been kind of an offensive clinic the last couple of games. And I think, you can't bat an eye when you have that kind of game against the defending champions, especially for the second time in a season on their home court. But they'll get a rubber match tonight as the listeners are into this Friday night in Minneapolis. And I'm sure the Aces will be, extra motivation to put a great performance together. So that'll be a game to watch for sure.
And, what do you think that the Lynx need to do to continue, or what do you think they need to continue to do or adjust, if anything, before, tonight's rematch against Vegas?
I don't know how much of an adjustment they'll need to make. We'll see. I felt like it was a very tightly officiated game, which is interesting because you may have caught the comments after the game. Kelsey Plum felt that the Lynx were getting away with moving screens on just about every possession. From my view, it looked like the refs were calling fouls on just everybody on both teams and not really letting the game get in much of a rhythm. So we'll see if it's an officiated game where they let a little bit more go. The foul number definitely affected the Lynx too. Alana Smith picked up 3 first quarter fouls on Wednesday. And that was like, all right, Myisha Hines-Allen, you just got here, go in and be meaningful. And she was. So I think it's 2 good teams who obviously know each other very well. The Aces have that Olympic quartet who played for Cheryl though in the Olympics. I know we're going to talk more Olympic basketball later in the show, but they all know each other, very well and are familiar. And it kind of like, this is what will happen when you get in the playoff. It's just going to be 2 really good teams who have a really good idea what the other team is going to try to do. And then it just, turns into a heavyweight matchup. So I think, when you beat a team like that, try and go out and do the same thing. But I think it'll be interesting to see what they do. What I think a notable part of Wednesday night, while the Lynx did shoot 57% from 3, you could tell Vegas was really trying to limit their 3-point attempts, and the Lynx they did hold them to 19 3-point attempts, and the Lynx made most of them. But they always, in a game, they want to get more attempts than that. Cheryl wants to lead the league in 3-point attempts. So I don't know if a matter of that is just when you keep hitting shots, you don't really get any second chance opportunities. So the attempt number will be lower, but I think Vegas did do an admirable job of forcing the Lynx inside and maybe getting them out of their comfort zone a little bit, but just everything that went up went in. So If they get more looks from three, if that's kind of an adjustment from Becky Hammond, then that will be interesting to see, because they definitely forced the Lynx to not just shoot threes, which is a good adjustment if you're playing the Minnesota Lynx, but it wasn't very effective on one night.
Awesome. Well, coming up next, we'll talk about how the Olympians fared from the Lynx while they were in Paris and the team's push for the playoffs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And with the WNBA back from its Olympic break, you can bet on individual games like the rematches between the Minnesota Lynx and the Las Vegas Aces, and between the Phoenix Mercury and the Atlanta Dream tonight. You can also bet on who will win the championship as well as most valuable player. You can also build your own parlay and choose from categories including point scoring, made three-pointers, assists, and rebounding. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode is brought to you by Apostrophe. I've struggled with self-confidence, especially as I've planned my wedding over the last year. I've prioritized taking care of myself and being kind to myself, and over time have grown to love myself more than I have in years. One of the biggest things that can lead to a lack of self-confidence is your skin, and that's why we're excited to partner with Apostrophe, the sponsor of this episode. Just fill out an online consultation about your skin goals and medical history, take a few selfies, and a dermatology provider will create a customized treatment plan for you. Apostrophe offers access to prescription treatments for all types of acne, and it's helped me improve my skin texture as well. We have a special deal for our audience. Get your first visit for only $5 at apostrophe.com/lockedon when you use our code LOCKEDON. That's a savings of $15. This code is only available to our listeners. To get started, just go to apostrophe.com/lockedon and click Get Started. Then use our code LOCKEDON at signup and you'll get your first visit for only $5. Thank you, Apostrophe, for sponsoring this episode. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So, Terry, before we get back to the WNBA season, how did the 4 Olympians from the Lynx do in Paris?
They did pretty well. You know, you had Cheryl Reeve coaching USA and Nafisa Collier starting for USA. I mentioned that Fee did miss the last 5 games before the break. So to see her, starting and playing meaningful minutes in the Olympics is great for Lynx fans, just to, cheer for one of their favorite players, but also from a basketball, strategic standpoint, thinking about the future, knowing that, she was pushing through and available and able to play at a high level was obviously great to see, especially considering that she was playing the position, Fee loved the power forward spot. When you're playing with Breanna Stewart and Aisha Wilson, it kind of pushes you down to the 3. So I thought she played really well. There's this kind of that, tough as nails defense from Fee that we've expected to see her in her career. And then just a lot of, meaningful rebounding, timely buckets. And Cheryl had a great comment in their welcome back press conference after they're just surviving by the skin of their teeth in that gold medal game against France. Steve Kerr reached out to her and said, "Welcome to the Thank God Club," which kind of is the role if you are a men's basketball coach or women's basketball coach in USA basketball in the Olympics. It kind of just is, you better win gold by any means necessary. So for Cheryl and Fee to come back, with the 8th consecutive gold medal for USA women's basketball secured, can't ask for much more than that. And then Alana Smith was just marvelous for Australia and got the nod for the All-Star 5. She had mentioned before leaving that for all the Australian players, they weren't happy with their performance in Tokyo in 2021, and really wanted to get Australia back to the level that they've been known for over the years. But it's still been a few Olympic cycles without a medal. So getting back to the podium on the final day, I know was super meaningful for Alana and for all of the Australian basketball players. So that was, awesome to see. And then the results weren't there for Canada, but Bridget Carleton was awesome in the Olympics. I believe she was named their team MVP. She showed a ton of emotion about it in the welcome back conference or welcome back press conference as well. And I think, Canada will have an opportunity to make another run at it. Obviously, just getting to the Olympics is an accomplishment in itself and is not easy to do. And just like the way it's working, there's a lot of young talent on that Canadian national team. And Bridget's kind of in the middle in terms of like ages and primes of, the players who probably just played their last Olympic cycle and players coming up. So in 2028 LA, we could very well see a Canadian national team that is built primarily around Bridget Carleton. And that will be really exciting for, everyone who's a fan of Bridget Carleton, which should be everybody because Bridget is awesome and really easy to root for. So I think it would have been fun, to see if all three countries represented by the Lynx could medal. That would have been asking for quite a lot, but I think it was a great performance by all three players, and as a coaching performance from Cheryl as well. That's not an easy coaching job by any stretch. So they got the hardware. They got back. They stayed healthy, which is important. That's the main thing. No injuries over there in Paris. So I think if you're a Lynx fan, you had a lot to be happy about and a lot to enjoy during the Olympic season this year.
Awesome. Well, going back to the WNBA side, the Lynx have, as you mentioned earlier, gone 3-0 since coming back from the Olympic break. With the start of the playoffs just about a month away, where do the Lynx stand, and are they in a position to push for a top 2 spot in the playoffs?
They are, and it will be pretty exciting to see where they end up. As it stands today, as we're talking, they're just a half game back of the Connecticut Sun in position in the standings for the second spot. They've kind of just been in the third. I haven't looked up days they've spent is the number 3 team in the league, but they've kind of been in that spot before. So I think if you're a betting person on position, I think around the third seed is where they're likely to stay. But they have a chance to get into the top 2. They'll play Connecticut again. They'll play New York again. So they'll have those opportunities. But yeah, I think these 3 games, you've kind of seen the ways in which they can win. In that first game back, which, Collier and Smith and Cheryl had, just gotten off the plane like less than 48 hours before one of my fellow reporters asked Cheryl if she'd gotten any sleep as the first question of that, pregame, and she just laughed and said, working on it. So, and I think that was everyone who is involved in the Olympics. It's like, all right, great. You were an Olympian, awesome tournament. Welcome home. You have a game in 12 hours, essentially. Fee had a funny comment on SportsCenter after the game last night where they asked about the time change, and she said, well, I never really adjusted in Paris. So coming back, it was just back to normal, which I guess kind of life of an athlete when you're, flying to all these games all the time. So I think they are in prime position, and then seeing just the way in which they're playing right now, I think adding Hines-Allen really helps bolster them in areas that they needed it. They did a little bit tougher with her. It's another player who can guard, really tough post matchups. She is also undersized, as kind of all of the Lynx post players are mentioned as undersized posts. But Cheryl mentioned last night she remembers watching Myisha guarding Sylvia Fowles, and when Washington has had deep playoff runs over the years with her on the roster. She's the one who's guarded Brittany Griner or Jonquel Jones. So I think that's just another piece that can help in that regard, because teams will try and either bully the Lynx down low, or and just try and muck up the game a little bit to slow them down. And that's an area that I think Reeve noted they needed to get better, and I think Hines-Allen does make them better there. So the stretch run, 12 games here in what feels like just a couple of weeks before, I know it was probably like 4 weeks total, but there's a lot of exciting matchups, and I think we'll see the top of the standings will be very, very tight. And I know this team wants home court bad. They've played really well at home this season after kind of weirdly underperforming at home last year despite making the playoffs. So they want home court in that first round at least, for sure, and they'll definitely, I think, push Connecticut for that second spot.
Awesome. Well, coming up next, we'll talk about what to expect the rest of the season from the Lynx, including a look ahead at Maya Moore's jersey retirement on Saturday. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. I know walks make me feel so much better, but when I get busy, it feels impossible to fit them in. When you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Going to therapy has been so helpful for me, especially as I've gone through a lot of life transitions over the last year. I've learned many positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. Therapy has also empowered me to be the best version of myself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp. HELP.com/lockedonnba. So, Terry, you kind of touched on this a little bit at the end of our last segment, but what do the Lynx need to do to lock in or adjust as they push towards the playoffs?
I think they just need to keep feeding Fee. I think they're one of the most unselfish teams in the league. They lead the league in assists, and which is something that comes up when you talk about this team daily. They're also sort of assist ratio going into the break. It was just sort of common. You look at a box score, it's 27 made attempts with 20 assists. And now there's a little bit more of a discrepancy between that number, but I think they're still leading the league in assist ratio by kind of a lot. So I think what Cheryl has talked about and what Fee has talked about as well is making sure that ball movement and that just team offense is there, but also making sure your superstar is getting their looks. And I think we've seen Fee get off to a great start in these past few games. I think the Lynx had a little bit of a lethargic feel to them in that first game back, and Fee just kind of had that snap moment in the second quarter and just scored 10 straight points to make sure there wasn't a run by the Mystics in the game that you absolutely should win. So I think these last few wins are a great example of how to win when Afisa Collier is your best player, and teams will obviously try to take that away, and there'll be some pretty tough defensive matchups coming up as you look at the schedule and who the best defensive players on those teams are. But they do have an identity of living by the three, and when the three is not falling, that the defense can save the day, because defense travels well and doesn't have the same volatility as shooting 60% from three like they almost did last night. So I think it's, as long as they stay healthy, they have an approach that pretty much keeps them in every game. They are a hard team to pull away from. They're a hard team to blow out, and they're just a pain in the butt to play against, because they can have a really free flowing high octane offense, and that's matched with just grind you down defense. And you don't often see teams with both of those characteristics. So I think they'll be a problem for a lot of teams down the stretch. So I think they kind of just need to hang on to this identity that they've had, but also, treat Fee like a top 3 player on the planet, because she is sort of in that range now and is absolutely playing like it. So if they keep her involved and make sure she's getting at least, 15 shots or more a night, I think they'll be in pretty good shape.
And Saturday, the Lynx are going to be retiring Maya Moore's jersey. I know this is a loaded question, but for the listeners that may be a little newer to the sport or less familiar with Maya Moore, what has she meant to the Lynx organization, and what impact did she have?
I mean, is it a cop out to say everything? Because that is, what Maya meant. I was, just sort of old enough when the Lynx were in their inaugural season to go. So I thankfully, by the time Maya was there and drafted in 2011, I had been a Lynx fan and a supporter for a decade at that point. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times we hype up these players coming out of college and just sort of have transcendent expectations like immediately, which you are seeing now with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and others in the sport. And Maya had those same kind of expectations when she came in and helped the team win a championship in her rookie season. So I think what she meant was, you've listened to Caitlin Clark on many occasions talk about how important Maya was just to her to have that, person to look up to. Fee is from the same town, Jefferson City, Missouri, as Maya Moore is, and, got the chance to meet Maya, as, in elementary school and in middle school. And so we're seeing players in real time now who are inspired by Maya Moore's greatness on the court, and that greatness was absolutely matched and exceeded by everything she's done off the court, which we've all seen her continue to do. She's just a pretty amazing human being. But yeah, I mean, she was just iconic superstar that somehow exceeded the just out of this world expectations that were levied on her, like as a rookie, even before she was a rookie. So, people here think about the 2010s dynasty, 4 championships in 7 years, very, very fondly, and just how fun those years were, and just how amazing it was to watch Maya play. So absolute, Minnesota icon, and it'll be really fun to have her in the house again on Saturday. I think she'll be at the game on Friday as well. But to see that number go in the rafters, that she's the 5th and final member of that incredible lineup that, forged the Lynx dynasty. So getting to see all 5 jerseys and names up there will be really special for a lot of people. And it's no mistake that it's on the night that Caitlin Clark will be there as well. When the first time Indiana came here earlier this year, I asked Caitlin about, like, not to look ahead, whatever, but there is a game on the schedule where your hero will be honored in kind of the most amazing way. And she just really perked up and is so grateful to be, part of the night and part of the festivities. So it'll be a really emotional and special night for a lot of people.
Awesome. And, with that in mind, what other games should Lynx fans circle on their calendars as that push for the playoffs continues?
Right. I mean, there's no shortage of juicy storylines or big matchups with, I mean, coming out of the break, we've seen Atlanta play really well now. Like they're trying to push for a spot. So it's like, it seems, there's 9 teams that can make the playoffs. So virtually every night you'll be playing a team that isn't thinking about, lottery ping pong balls or anything like that. They'll be trying to be gunning for it and work their way into the playoff mix. But I think that last road trip of the year, where they have the final game of the season is a home game against the Sparks, who are not fighting for the playoffs. But that last road trip before that, they play the Liberty in New York on Sunday, and then at Connecticut on Tuesday. And I New York could very well have the number 1 seed wrapped up by then, but I would guess the 2 seed the fight for the 2 seed goes into that final Tuesday night of the season, and that could very well decide who gets to be 2 and who's 3. It'll be a preview of like hopeful semifinals matchups for the teams involved. So that last road trip at New York, at Connecticut, really tough way to end a regular season, but what a great primer for the playoffs to be playing teams that also have a design of winning a championship. New York, who's probably still mad about losing the Commissioner's Cup to the Lynx, and then also the Connecticut, who eliminated the Lynx in the playoffs last year. So that'll be so I don't know if it'll be telling because once the playoffs start, it's a brand new season, but it will feel like the playoffs on that final road trip. So that's kind of what I have my eyes on.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today, Terry. Where can the listeners find you online?
I am on Twitter at Terry Horstman and Instagram at Terrence Horstman. And then, just writing about the Lynx for the nexthoops.com. So any of those places, you can find me, find my work about the Lynx.
And I'm sure we'll be having you, or if not me, one of our other hosts as the playoff continues back on Locked On Women's Basketball.
For sure. Looking forward to it.
And thanks to our listeners for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Now go check out the Locked On NBA podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NBA in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now make sure to tune in tomorrow as well to hear from our WNBA draft group.